episode is brought to you by A3, a CMMC cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification, otherwise known as an OSC, to build CMMC packages and share with a marketplace of consultant RPOs and assessor C3PAOs. Hi, everybody. I'm Dana, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. I will be your host, and our guest today is Tony UV, and his company is VerSprite. Hi, Tony. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Dana? Thanks
Good.
for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you and your company.
Sure. Well, I'm an IT security professional that started VerSprite about 15 years ago. I've been in the industry of ITIS for about 25 years, and we are a global cybersecurity firm.
Very nice. Very nice. And so today we're going to talk about getting ready for CMMC, everybody's new favorite little thing. So our first question is going to be, so what is CMMC and how does somebody determine if it's worth tackling as an initiative for a vendor for the federal government?
Yeah, it all comes down to the money. So at VerSprite, we've done a lot of work with entities that are outside of three-letter agencies, and then we've also worked with three-letter agencies. This is not the first time there's a federal, mandate or requirement. In this particular case, the DoD is looking to turn the fire a little bit on contractors that are handling, federal contracts, unclassified information. And the big question is always, is it worth paying and getting to this level of certification to get those federal dollars? Things are slow moving with CMMC. So the answer to that is to be determined, but let's take a look at some of the precedents. You have FISMA, which is a Federal Information Security Management Act of 2002. You have FedRAMP, which is a requirement for service providers that are managing information for federal agencies in the cloud. And the entities that have invested to get FedRAMP certified, as an example, have done well. There's been a lot of major technology companies, service companies that have actually bitten the bullet, gotten their security posture way elevated, taken the journey of 15 months, oftentimes maybe even 18 months of trying to get their security package ready for federal inspection. And after that, it is a windfall. From there on out, you are known to support the federal government and its multiple agencies, with respect to, in this case, federal contract information or unclassified, contract information, controlled unclassified information, I should say. So it's still very early with CMMC. Things are moving. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of buzz. There's even the third-party assessment organizations. They're called 3PAL players that are ready to take your money and certify you. But there's many ways to do business with the DoD if you are managing this type of information. And there might be, it just depends on, do you have a federal game plan, right? So that, going back to the question, is it worth it? Well, if you have a one-off, then work with your agency and see what you can do. Maybe you go underneath the prime. Maybe you do an informal self-certification to 800-171, which was what was required by the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation supplement. But CMMC came about because people were self-certifying to what's called DFARS, what I just mentioned, and they were kind of getting away with murder. So some of that self-certification was just kind of like paperweight. Now it's some other entity, a 3PAL player, really kicking the tires on your particular business, seeing if you fit the mustard to do business with the DoD. So it's a lot more strenuous. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It's not something that you're going to get certified with in 2 to 3 weeks or 2 to 3 months. So if you've been ISO certified, if you've been PCI certified, if you've been HIPAA, well, you can't really get certified with a law like HIPAA, but if you've had compliance initiatives against HIPAA, or if you've even achieved your FedRAMP certification, I think the most congruent effort to CMMC would be that FedRAMP certification. But it is an overarching, if you think that SOC 2 and PCI are bad, put them together, add some more craziness, and voila, you have some CMMC.
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right. Okay, so let's see here. This is a good question here. We were just started talking about this as far as time estimates. So what time estimates and investments should someone plan for CMMC?
Yeah, that's a great question. Time investments, again, budget around 12 to 18 months. On average, it's really about 15, especially if, lean more on the larger side of time commitments. If this is your first hurrah in dealing with certifying with a major federal certification effort, such as CMMC. And the reason is because you first have to define the scope of your business that is actually handling control unclassified information or federal contract information, right? It might be, taxpayer information. It might be code, source code. It might be schematic designs, blueprints, anything that is dubbed unclassified yet controlled information that the federal government wants to make sure that they have someone in bed with them that is actually has a pretty decent security posture. So for those reasons, I mean, they look at the full enchilada of a security program. And what does that begin with? Governance, policies, standards, processes, technology, that security technology used for vulnerability management around systems that might have that controlled and classified information, access control, risk management procedures. It is literally the full enchilada. And if I'm mentioning security themes and topics that are resonating with the security community out there that are familiar with ISO or NIST frameworks, then it's because it is really leveraging a framework of 800 and 171 as a baseline, but you have hundreds of controls here. And so the investment is, in terms of financial investment, let's talk about that for a second. You're really looking as a business to probably shell out two major financial commitments. One is in the assessment effort, getting your security program body, if you will, in the gym, in shape, so that you can basically get ready for the certification, right? So that process is the 12 to 15 to 18 months I've been talking about, right? It's getting ready. And then the other one is the actual certification process. And that process, could take an extra 6 to 8 months, right? Two different costs, I would budget for both anywhere between, so the assessment part might take anywhere from 150 to 200, $225,000. And then the rubber stamping, if let's just call it that, from a 3PAL player might take another 125, to $200,000. So now here's some good news. So before that number sits into the minds of listeners that are out there, there is kind of a payback or reimbursement that is possible with CMMC, right? And so the federal government knows that this is a cost for businesses, and you want to check with the agency that you're working with or the joint authority board to see if your particular line of work in support of the DoD can actually be baked into your pricing model or your service model. So that's definitely food for thought. But once you're in, you may now be called upon for additional work, and that's where the financial windfall that everyone is after is really the finish line for a lot of the vendors trying to get certified.
SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies in the defense industrial base with CMMC preparation and federal cybersecurity regulations. Big or small, SteelRoot is here to help design, build, and manage IT. The SteelRoot reference architecture is a secure, cloud-native operating environment built on zero trust principles. SteelRoot also provides managed cybersecurity, IT, and virtual ISSO services. Visit steelroot.us for more information. I think some of those numbers, they're scary. That's a lot of money. You have to be a really big company to be able to kind of swing that. So I think that's something that I think smaller companies are going to need to take into consideration when it comes to, wow, is this really even going to be worthwhile? And it's going to be very interesting to see who can then pass the expense on and who can't. So, because that's a big difference, whether or not you can put it into your pricing or you can't put it into your pricing.
Yeah, and again, so let's say that you've already been down the road of, let's say, FedRAMP certification. You might already have a lot of these domains of security already in your back pocket. Your process procedures all are pretty tight. So you might actually be on the lesser side, like 10 to 12 months. So you might be looking at the, $100,000 as an initial outlay for assessment or even lower. For a smaller company, it really depends on scope. So you might have a smaller company that all they're doing, let's say they're doing some bookkeeping for a small facet of the DoD, and they're receiving a couple contracts, maybe over email or a secure medium, like, encrypted email, or, maybe some sort of like encrypted VPN tunnel where there's information exchange over that. And that's it. And there's one person doing it. It's, so the scope of technology, the scope of services and procedures is very small. So it may not be a very lofty effort to certify that little of an environment. So it comes down to scope, understanding, okay, what type of information do we manage on behalf of the DoD? And is it formally classified as federal contract info or controlled unclassified information? And if it is, what is the processes, the people, and the technology that are helping me as an entity do that job function for the federal government? And so that is the scope part that will make or break less than six figures or not. So.
Okay. So now here's another one. So how do they know if they're going to be required to handle CMMC? And I always ask this question because I want to make sure that, how are people finding out about this? Like I said, the train is coming down the tracks. A lot of people don't believe it's going to happen because, it's the government. And some people think, well, it's not really going to apply to me or for what I specifically do. So what do you think?
So just, because we've worked at VerSprite with so many different federal agencies that, a lot with FedRAMP, a lot with FISMA, and we've helped, outside companies get their what's called ATO, their authority to operate. The answer is more definitively going to come from the agency, right? If the agency brings up the subject, then and they say, hey, future relations and ongoing support of what we have established in contract right now is under jeopardy. They typically, what they do is they say you have a grace period of, 12, 24, 36 months so that you can go ahead and chase this down. They're typically agencies, like they don't want to disrupt something that's working for them, a service provider that's working for them, just because of a certification that is a huge endeavor. So they're pretty graceful in terms of lending, amounts of time, and also providing individuals with the opportunity, or companies the opportunity, to achieve that level of certification. So it's going to come directly from the agency. If you're looking at this as a business plan, like you might have a product, you might have a service, and you're trying to penetrate the market, then yeah, you're going to have to, it's going to be more attractive for you to say, let me go ahead and bite the bullet. That might be a riskier play, but I mean, if this is what your business model is about, then you might want to bite the bullet, make the investment, and you'll have that one-up capability compared to the rest of your competitors that might not be CMMC certified. So that is a big difference there.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, because I know this right now we're talking about the government, and the primes would then be dictating to the subs. But even in the private sector, this is eventually what's going to be happening, if it's not even maybe in a few years, where if you're doing work with a bigger company, the bigger company may say, well, what are you doing for cybersecurity? And you're going to have to show them something. So this is all coming down the road, I think, over the next 10 years. If we look at where we are now versus in 10 years when it comes to cybersecurity and just everyone's general acceptance of it, I think it's going to be completely different. I think it's going to have to be completely different.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work. Again, you're talking about hundreds of controls. At the level one, there's 5 levels of this cybersecurity maturity model certification. And the base level is at 171 controls, right? And so out of the gate, the difference with CMMC is that you can't self-certify, right? You have to be able to now have a third party certify you. But going way up in the pyramid is the 5th echelon of maturity, which is level 5, and you have an additional 171 controls, and then in between that you have roughly about close to 400 additional controls between 2, 3, 4. So this is a lot of work, and it's typically something that companies rely on, companies like us at VerSprite, where we've helped extremely large companies that are in software, that are in services, to be able to evaluate what are they doing for a federal agency. How can we help build a security plan and the artifacts? There's a lot of artifacts that are presented to the Federal Joint Authority Board or to the agency. A system security plan is a major artifact. Project objectives and milestones is a major artifact. There's a lot of different artifacts that are created, and it's a lot of work. So oftentimes we recommend stick to your core competencies in whatever you're doing as a software manufacturer, maker, or service provider, and let a partner like VerSprite be able to come in, help evaluate, get you to where you need to be so that you can potentially capture those federal dollars.
That's good. And that also helps it be less overwhelming when you're bringing in a professional that's knows exactly what to put into place. And then they just tell you, okay, this is what you need to do, X, Y, and Z, versus trying to figure this out from,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have any extra advice or anything else you'd like to throw out there before we go?
Well, just parting, thoughts really is make sure that you keep a stethoscope on CMMC developments. Right now, things are moving a bit slow, which plays to the advantage of those entities that have a relationship now with the federal government or want a relationship with the federal government. I think it's going to be easier for those, obviously, that already have an existing relationship. As long as that contract is in good standing, you might be able to buy a lot of time. Second thing to understand right now, regardless of how CMMC is moving in terms of a mandate from DoD, is understand what is the information that you are actually consuming, managing, processing, transmitting that falls underneath these categories of controlled unclassified information or federal contract information. So understand so that you can start to build in your team's head, where is this information going? Is it all over the place? Is it on-prem? Is it in the cloud? Is it on endpoints? Then go ahead and try to have some level of diligence right now so that when the time comes when you want to flip the switch, then you'll have a tighter scope. And a tighter scope is going to mean cost savings, definitely, especially when you talk to an assessment partner or even a certifying body.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Shrink the scope as much as you can. So that way when it's time, like I said, save some money. Yes. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Tony. We appreciate your time and all of your great input. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we hope to see you on the next episode of 123 CMMC.
Thanks, Dana.
Bye. This episode is brought to you by A3, a CMMC cloud-based collaborative environment for an organization seeking certification, otherwise known as an OSC, to build CMMC packages and share with a marketplace of consultant RPOs and assessor C3PAOs.